Previously on the Pestle.
Are you crazy? You could not pay me to walk back in there. There's no way.
You don't expect your friend to shoot you in the face.
Now let's dim the lights and start the show.
How has it been almost 300 episodes and we've never done that? That's brilliant.
Welcome, everybody, to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by the philosophy of time travel. What would future you write to you? Find out in Roberta Sparrow's The Philosophy of Time Travel. Welcome, everyone, to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we are filmmakers, write, direct, score, compose, act, do post, all the things. And we like to use some of that insight into reviewing films as well as learn from films how to do those things better. It's a cycle, if you will, a never-ending Ouroboros kind of thing. Yeah. And speaking of things eating themselves alive, what are we covering today, man?
Right into it. We are covering Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola's longtime project. If you haven't seen this film, please pause the episode and go watch it because we're going to spoil things. Right now, it just opened when we're recording this, so it should probably still be in theaters when you're hearing this, but yeah, you should pause it because we don't want to spoil a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, we'll do a bunch of things. We'll review Megalopolis and then talk a little bit about story and writing, exposition, melodrama, and afterwards, at the end of the episode, which probably won't take too long, we're going to rank our top 5 or 10 films. I think Todd has prepared 5. At one point, you mentioned you had 5. This is from a listener request who also has a film request coming up in a few weeks. And yeah, so we'll do all those things and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. The city of New Rome is the main conflict between Cesar Catilina, a brilliant artist in favor of a utopian future, and the greedy mayor, Franklyn Cicero. Between them is Julia Cicero, her loyalty divided between her father and her beloved. It's written and directed by Francis Ford Coppola, cinematography by Mihai Malaimare Jr., featuring Adam Driver as Cesar Catilina, Giancarlo Esposito as Mayor Cicero, Nathalie Emmanuel as Julia Cicero, Aubrey Plaza as Val Platinum, Shia LaBeouf as Clodio, and Jon Voight as Crassus.
Julia.
Hi.
Come in.
I had hoped to speak with Mr. Crassus.
I love that sound. Listen, you and I ought to have an understanding. You're on my territory now, and you're gonna play by my rules. Okay? 1, Crassus is mine. 2, the bank is mine. And 3, and this may come as a little surprise to you, right? Caesar's mine. And he has been for a long time.
Okay, Todd, so before we get going, I just want to add a little context that's worth remembering. Francis Ford Coppola is one of the most important filmmakers of all time. Like, that's indisputable. There was a stretch over 7 years between 1972 to 1979 where he made 4 movies in a row that continued to not just redefine film, but have an impression on certainly American cinema and audiences, but globally, I would think. We weren't alive for those moments, but I would think that's pretty much how that went down. He made The Godfather, Best Picture winner. And then in 1972, he made 2 films. He wrote and wrote The Conversation, which is still an incredibly important film when you're talking about the surveillance state, all kinds of interesting, philosophical implications about government and governance and personal responsibility, all these kinds of things. And in that same year, he released The Godfather Part 2, which is someone goes and makes Citizen Kane and then says, you know what? I'm going to make a follow-up. You're like, no, don't do that. What are you doing? That's a terrible idea. And then, he's like, hold my beer, and one-ups it. Like, many people think that's even better than the first one, which is outrageous, right? Like, that's insanity, to not just make that sequel, but then to make it a better film, is really outrageous. And then, he's 3 for 3. And at this point, the world is like yelling at Miles Morales, like, stop, you don't know what you're doing, kid. And Francis Ford Coppola looks at everyone and says, nah, I'm gonna do this my way, and releases Apocalypse Now, like one of the most important war films ever made. And that's insane. I don't know if you could say there's been a better run of 4 movies in a row by anyone ever. Hitchcock, Spielberg. I would challenge you to tell me who did better for 4 films in a row to redefine cinema, and audience expectations. So all that to say, when you're talking about Francis Ford Coppola, it's inherent that you should put some respect on his name. And here we are at what he's aiming to be his pinnacle. Like, this took a long time to make. He invested a lot of his own money into making it. I don't know exactly how much of the $120 million, but probably more than I would be comfortable with. Yeah.
All of it, right? Wasn't the 120
Was it all his? Oh,
yeah.
Man.
Yeah. He bypassed studios. That's why there's no, at the beginning of movies, you've got like 4 or 5 different studios that they show, like Castle Rock and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There's like nothing. It's a straight into the movie.
Just American Zoetrope.
Right? Well,
yeah.
There's just that one, which is his
his
production company, and that's it. There's no other, like Warner Brothers or Universal or whatever. So, yeah.
So, with all that said, was it worth the wait? Did Megalopolis live up to someone with that kind of pedigree?
No.
Oh, okay.
All right, it's been fun.
Yeah,
it's been fun.
Episode. What are you recommending this week?
Yeah. Okay. I went into this not having any idea, and I realized, pretty quickly, oh, this is a play. It's his way of putting a play into a movie, in his whatever this way is, right? Now, that's really hard to do. I mean, I don't know if it's even possible. I mean, sure it's possible, but like it is, a play is a play because you can see everything all the time, right? A movie is a movie because you can't, and it's a highlight on reactions and emotions in a bottle, right? Each scene or each shot is its own little bottle. But a play, you can't get away from that. It is everything, everywhere, all at once. It's no matter where I sit, I can see the entirety of the stage. But that's what I got from it. Pretty quick, pretty early on, I realized, oh, okay, this feels like a play. Okay, so now I'm going to look at this through that lens instead of looking at it through the lens of this is a film. And so I think I might have enjoyed it more because I did that. I'm glad that I did that at the very beginning. That being said, I think I saw an interview with Bob Dylan one time. He did an interview, like, it might have been 20 years ago now, where he was talking about his writing, and the guy who interviewed him, and this has a point, I promise I'm getting to it, but it's a famous interviewer who was interviewing him, and he asked him, how did you do that? How did you make what you made? The timeless records that you made, how did you do that? And his response was, basically, I don't know. And I don't know that I could ever do it again. Meaning that one of the greatest, most prolific writers, like musical writers of a generation, and one that you could argue that many musicians now hearken back to and say that he was an influence, had lost it and can't get it back. Meaning that is fleeting. Meaning that there's something when you're young or when you have a certain mentality, maybe it's not age, it could be because the world beats you down and stuff changes you. But when you're young, before it has a chance to, you have a lot to say and you're passionate about it. And when you get older, even if you're passionate, sometimes what you have to say doesn't resonate with the generation that is looking for something specific. So in the 70s, when Coppola was making all those incredible films, in the way that he was making them, that was a perfect time with a perfect audience to make Godfather Part 2, right? Or to make Apocalypse Now, right? It was perfect. Not only was the subject matter perfect, but the way it was shot and the way he approached it, which was, this is what I want, I'm gonna get this, which was, other than Hitchcock, maybe, pretty novel, I think. There's probably a handful of directors who would stand up to studios and say, I want this way, or you don't get it. It's probably, yeah. So, but I think that now it might be that maybe he lost it or didn't lose it, but just doesn't care about anyone else at all, including the audience. He just wants to make what he wants to make, and that is honorable. And so I watched this film, and I'm even putting aside that it's Francis Ford Coppola, and I'm just watching it and thinking, this is somebody who had something to say in a specific way and didn't give a shit if I got it or not, and was going to make something that he or she wanted for a long time. Like I can tell that from this film. So that being said, it was all over the place, man. Like the editing was just it was so messy. We were jumping. I didn't ever know where we were. It's almost 100% close-ups. So getting scale is so. There were a few moments where we would get a wide of something that was real. I don't mean CG, because CG is everywhere. Right. You know? I see what you mean. In those moments, I felt, oh, thank you. I'm coming out, we're coming out of this kind of like fake, computerized world or something, or I felt the computer in it. And so every now and then it would show a shot of trees and leaves. And it was almost like I was trapped inside for a week and I went outside and touched grass for the first time. That's how it felt. And maybe that's what he wanted me to feel. That's what I felt, Yeah. But then it would quickly go right back into this world of of close-ups and mediums and stuff where I'm just looking at Adam Driver's face, and then I'm just looking at Wow's face, and I just didn't have my bearings most of the time, and he wasn't giving me anything to like get my bearings. And I think Adam Driver is an incredible actor. And anytime you give him anything, he's going to give you the best of himself. And I adore him for that. I don't think that he necessarily picks all the best stuff, but sometimes he picks incredible films. Yeah. So, and in this case, I think he's probably him and Nathalie, Emmanuel are fantastic together. Yeah. They're fantastic together. I love her. She's wonderful. I love Shia LaBeouf. I think everything he does is great as well. He killed this role. Jon Voight was incredible in this. And again, I'm looking at this not from the point of view, this is important that I called out that I'm looking at it from the point of view of a play, not a movie. If I were to be watching this like it's a movie, I would hate everything about it. There'd be no saving grace, honestly. Even Adam Driver and even Cesar and Julia, I just wouldn't be. Actually, Julia, I'd probably still believe it. But they performed like they were on a stage. The interactions between them were like they were on a stage. Totally cool. Totally cool. But if you go into this trying to watch a film, you will be sorely disappointed. Obviously, I saw the connection between Rome and civilization and technology, and then the collapse, and him, paralleling this with today. And, he doesn't call out AI, but maybe AI or just whatever, just technology in general. The more technology we get, the easier it is for the civilization to fall, and you need somebody to see the future and to build the future in the present. Okay. Wasn't there, what's the book? It's like a timeless book about an architect who, my wife would kill me.
Fountainhead. Yeah.
Is it the Falconhead?
Fountainhead.
Okay. Fountainhead. Okay. Yeah. There's probably pieces of that in here, I don't know, man. It was really long too, I don't want to shit on it, but I kind of have to just say, if you're going in to watch a movie, you're not gonna like it, probably, I would say. But yeah, and then the whole stopping time thing, that's cool, but it's more of a metaphor rather than something that he uses, which kind of defeats the point of how cool it actually is. It is cool that he can stop time and nobody sees it except for Julia, and so she's connected to him that way. And then in the end, it's interesting, and I want your take on the end where she stops time, and the baby keeps going because I guess the baby's the future. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but he doesn't really use it for anything to benefit him or to benefit society, at least not that we see. So I don't fully understand it, other than to show a connection between them as, husband, wife, or like a partner. But it's an interesting kind of cool thing. So when it happens at the beginning, I'm thinking, ooh, what am I getting into? Okay, this is interesting. But then they go into that, whatever that room is with the model of the city, and they have that whole exchange. That was when I knew it was a play. I was like, oh, this is scaffolding of a play.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. This is what this is. Okay. We're in for a long haul now. Okay. And that's where I kind of sat back. I was like, took a breath. All right, let's do this. Anyway.
Good on you for recognizing that. It definitely occurred to me but I think I got a little bit polluted years ago whenever he released Tetro. I remember reading an interview around that time, whatever that was, 2008, 2007 or something. And he was talking about how he's not looking forward in his filmmaking techniques anymore. He's liking to regress into before him, into like the 40s and 50s style, where it's more about the blocking and allowing the audience to sit and be an observer in the room by doing less with the camera. And that way you can kind of let the actors perform more. And so I recognized like this was one part Shakespeare and one part Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, and kind of doing the worst of all of it. And I don't necessarily think he's like a pro Fountainhead person, but I think he liked some of that groundwork and wanted to use some of those same concepts, because I didn't walk away from this at all thinking that Howard, whatever his name is, Rourke. I read that like a year or two ago, so that's mildly fresh on my mind, and never reading it again, by the way. But fascinating, but really long-winded, as is her way, I guess. And so with all that, like it really didn't click that if you watch this as a play, it might be an easier experience. And so for me, it was a very hard experience. And the one thing, and you can say what you want about what I'm about to say in terms of, well, you're so mannish, Wes. The one thing that actually kept me engaged with this is Nathalie Emmanuel. Like, I just think she is obscenely beautiful. Ever since she popped up on Thrones, I watch a lot of her work. Some of some of the projects are better than others. And I don't think that's a reflection on her. It's just what as an actor can you sometimes, get to be a part of. And if Francis Ford Coppola calls your name, you're like, yes, please. And so that really did help keep me like literally engaged with the film and trying to understand the story. And I still didn't understand any of it. And I love what you said about Adam Driver. I agree. Like, I adore him, Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf, because you could tell they really sold out for this film. Like, they held nothing back, and they gave it their all. And it didn't make for good performances. Unfortunately, there is no good performances in this entire movie, but I don't hold that against the actors themselves. Like, I agree with Jon Voight. I thought killed it. It was just killing it in a really bad movie, like bad writing. And sometimes there's just no way to elevate the story that you're a part of. You have to really bring it back to your director. And I think that's the other thing that kind of bummed me out. Francis Ford Coppola, obviously, he's got a background as a brilliant filmmaker, but his daughter is also a brilliant filmmaker. And I don't know what their dynamic is, but as someone who I don't keep up with whatever, like gossip mags, so maybe there's like bad blood or maybe they're best friends. I really have no idea. I've seen some of her early stuff, walking around filming stuff on his sets, kind of, which is really fascinating. But I'm like, if Sofia Coppola is related to me and I'm about to drop, 100 milli into a project, maybe I run the script by her. Maybe I say, hey, would you mind sitting with me and giving me your thoughts and helping me rewrite this? It's one thing for someone to drop $5 million in, let's say you do have 100 million in the bank and you see your buddy who's about to go make a $5 million disaster. Maybe you just say, you know what? It's an art piece. Go for it. But if I'm about to drop everything I own into one movie and I show you this script and you don't say, I don't really get it. You might want to take a step back, take a breath and get more feedback on the script because this is insanity. I don't think I would have friends. Like if no one could tell me that I'm about to bankrupt myself. I don't know what his financial situation is, but I would hope someone told him something like this. I love your intention here, but maybe we need to rethink the story itself because yeah, you're right, man. You get to the end of the film and he's saying something. This entire movie, it's clear he's trying to say something. The problem is this story was so bad and so abrasive to me as an audience member that I just didn't care. I didn't want to peel back any of the layers because it's so shallow. And that's the wild part of this ride was there's both like this kind of perfunctory, shallow like execution that is overlaying some really deep thoughts, but which is just crazy, like to have something so incomprehensible be something also so superficial. Like that's the antithesis of art to me. Like you can do one, like I know we don't generally talk about other films here, but Beau is Afraid I hated. Like that was one of the worst experiences in a movie theater I've ever had. Short of that other film that you and I saw, where it was just one 80-minute assault on the audience. The audio thing about sound or something like you've wiped it from your memory. It was like so bad. I can't remember what was that. I can't remember what that was. It was this indie like $2,000 movie where someone made a film in their basement or something. It was just awful. And it was worse than that. And it was also like 2.5 times as long, but I was able to still, because it was so well told and executed, the director did what they wanted to do in Beau is Afraid. It was just, I hated the story and I hated the experience, but I understood the layers that he was trying to get at. I could peel back those layers because of the execution, the competency. And this felt like an incompetent film. Like this was something that I would make as my first film, minus the $100 million budget, because like the compositing was awful. Like there was just so many rudimentary things that made you wonder, how is this the same person who made these other films? Now, granted, Coppola also made Bram Stoker's Dracula, which not to this level, but it's certainly not Apocalypse Now. And so it's not that he's never had this in him. Of course, he has. But I didn't understand some basic things like the direction with the production design. Like there were so many clashing styles visually, just on a very simple basis. Like you have like these really old, 50s cars juxtaposed with like these brand new cars. Like that's a 2024 police cruiser driving through the scene right next to this 1950 Speedster or whatever. I don't know I'm not a car guy, sorry. But and then it's just not cohesive. There's no cohesive style whenever you have this Greco-Roman thing happening, chariot races and that kind of thing, with 70s flowy dresses and headbands or whatever's happening. I'm sorry, I didn't note all this. I didn't watch this twice. I couldn't.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think there's a reason why you would want those things. This is what bums me out, is whenever you have a dozen different clashing styles like this, there's no strong contrast for when you present Caesar's visionary city. Because whenever you have 12, you're just adding one more. It's like, oh, this is just one more kind of clashing thing. Now, there is this nature element that you pointed out that gives you something. But at the same time, it gets drowned out with all the other stuff that you're doing here. It just becomes one more style thrown into the mix, instead of this very clean contrast of nature and technology, of how by pushing forward into the future, we've regressed. Like, I think these are some of the elements he's trying to get at, but it's just not playing because it's not strongly enough indicated through like production design. Then you have
I feel like it's like a kind of like his take on a Shakespeare play, where you've because Shakespeare talks about, at some points in some plays, whatever, about like, the people having power or whatever, or tearing down the king or the hierarchy. And he does call out in the beginning, like this whole, a civilization doesn't die immediately. It starts to die when the people stop believing in the society itself, and everything. So it felt to me like maybe he's calling out, and this is a maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's calling out this idea of this could happen. Don't let this happen. But say that, like in some concrete way. Like I don't really fully get that either, because Caesar anyway, sorry.
Yeah. And so like story and writing wise, here's just some of the basic things that kept pulling me out. Honestly, right from the opening scene, I had this drop in my stomach, because that's where Caesar is on the rooftop, right? And he walks out, and he teeters on the edge, and then he leans forward and yells, "Time, stop." Like, I knew we were in trouble. Like, that's such a clunky way to get that idea across, that it speaks to me of a lack of elegant execution. Like, whenever your dialogue isn't buttoned up or feel organic to the world, it just feels very clunky and lacking poetry. I was like, oh no, what's happening? But I fought to stay in this really the whole way through. But when we got to that scene that you talked about, the one that clued you in that this is a play was the one that clued me in that this is a bad movie.
Nice. Well, same here.
Yeah. Because they're all just kind of running around in the scaffolding with the press over here, and it was just, what is going on?
Overacting, just
way overacting. And so the other things that were just like, this is not just me. This is just, fundamental bad writing. Like the exposition was really sloppy, throughout the entire film. Like Julia talking to herself. That's always dicey. That's a dicey way to deliver information or revelations to the audience, is when a character says it out loud to themselves with no one around to like propel that out of them.
Great point. Yeah.
Very dicey. It works every once in a while, but it takes really good writing and execution. And so like her following him out, across the city, and he goes to see his wife that they reveal isn't really there. And she's witnessing this, she sneaks into the house somehow, and she's right there at the door, and she's saying something along the lines of, he still loves her. He still loves her. Like she's communicating that she doesn't think he killed his own wife. And it's also building on her adoration of him, right? Like that's all information for the audience.
That's when I started hating the film.
Yeah.
I'm glad I forgot about that moment. And then you call that out. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I could not stand that moment. It was like, oh, this, no matter what now, you're clawing to get me back.
Yeah.
That was awful. Yeah.
Really bad. Like, and that whole sequence going to his ghost wife was so, what are we doing? It's a fairly meaningless sequence. Like they kind of circle back to it later on, but it just felt like the idea of his dead wife, very sporadic and not ultimately fundamental to the story that was being told. It's supposed to be revealing of how evil Cicero is, but on the other hand, it makes Caesar look like a schizophrenic having an episode. Like, does he really see his dead wife? Because if so, we should probably address that with like medication and therapy. Like that's not good.
And with the whole journey, because we also saw Clodio. This is why I was thinking Shakespeare, because we also see Clodio following them too, and he hates Caesar because he knows that Julia loves him and he loves Julia, and so it's this whole kind of like, it's not fully Romeo and Juliet, but if you remember the film Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio, there's this whole scene where they're like chasing each other and you don't know where anything is, but they do it in a way where you get it and you understand. It's like all buttoned up and put together. This is, wait a minute, where did Clodio come from? And he's in a giant, huge limousine, huge SUV limousine. Nobody's going to see him, but that's what I'm talking about, that everything is super punched in and tight. So we don't have any context for where we are at any point. You could just, cut off to somebody else. That's, assumedly on the other side of town, but we don't know that they're not right there, So anyway.
And put a button in that Clodio Julia thing here in a second, because that deserves. Okay. But another like weird expositional moment was the high school. I think these high school students doing a paper, like they have some kind of high school paper that they're editing, and they're interviewing Julia. Like I didn't, at this grand event, and I didn't understand what this event was. Is this supposed to be the wedding reception, or is this something completely separate with the chariot races? And I don't know why what's happening at all. But they were there to reveal more information about her and Caesar and all that kind of stuff. And then like despite all the sloppy exposition, it still ruined me for understanding the motivations and arcs. Like it's all still strangely murky. Like I don't really understand exactly what Caesar is trying to accomplish and why Cicero hates him for that. At the beginning it was kind of clear, but as the movie went on, it just became less clear. Like it all felt just kind of thrown together. We've established that they hate each other, and now they can just kind of keep hating each other. And now it used to be about his vision for the city, and now it's about Julia. But I don't know. It wasn't very clear where we're going and why, which I think is important for this kind of film. And same thing, like I completely forgot, very quickly that Clodio was into Julia. That left my mind rather fast. That is established at the beginning. Now that you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. He did like her, because as the film went on, I was like, why does Clodio hate Caesar so much? Like, he is really out to get him in the weirdest, most cartoony, villainous way. And so, yeah, I guess that is at the root of it, but he kind of leaves that alone very quickly. Like that, he doesn't really come back to Julia very much. Maybe once, I think, through the rest of the film, he tries to get back to her, but it's very fast. But that leads me to, kind of the other thing that bothered me. It's all the overacting that you were talking about, which is really melodrama, which is all these unearned arcs and emotional swings, right? People pronouncing their feelings. There's that scene with Caesar and Julia whenever she goes to his office pretending to be, I don't know, like a boy or something, like a young elementary student or something. I don't know. It was the silly joke I think they were trying to make. And they're in that scene and she is threatening to walk out, a half dozen times and turning and yelling her feelings. And he's acting like Cool Hand Luke over there, who's completely unaffected by anything other than his dreams and visions of the world. But he's still challenging her. I don't know. It just felt, theatric, but just so overacted because there's no layers to this writing. There was never a point where you really understood her need for Caesar. It was just more of, she kind of sees something in him. Yeah, she saw that little stop time moment that he did during the demolition. But to your point, we never use that. It never becomes a thing other than just kind of a way to connect them and to imply some creative aspect to how Caesar is able to see the world that no one else is except her. But even with her, she is framed from the very beginning as this playgirl, sex kitten rebel. And then they immediately abandon that for someone who's smitten by Caesar and is the picture of responsibility, right? She's managing his schedule. Suddenly she becomes his personal assistant, and is gatekeeping for him and escorting him down runways or whatever, red carpets. Her arc makes absolutely no sense in the context of how they set it up. And I think that really speaks to the bigger problems with this film of just being all over the place based on what he feels like doing in any particular scene. I think he spent too much time maybe trying to get it made, not enough time thinking about what he wrote. And that's a rough place to be in. I don't know. I think it really goes to the collaborative experience of creating a movie. Bob Dylan can sit and write one of the best albums of all time because he only needs his guitar and a recorder, right? And paper, if that, and that's one. But a film, you need a minimum a dozen other people on the same page as you.
Yeah, we talk about this many times on this podcast, that one of the, yes, you're making art either way, but it is a completely different medium where it's expensive. It's more collaborative than any kind of music you could ever just, want to make. It's not the same. It's completely different. But the idea of, and you were talking earlier about, Sophia, and why wouldn't you pull Sophia in? And even if they have a good relationship, which I think they do.
I would assume, yeah.
Right? I mean, it goes back to the whole there is no Radiohead for Radiohead comment that we've talked about on here. You're Francis Ford Coppola. You don't, and you're 90,000 years old. You don't care what Sophia has to say when you have something to say. That's it. Why would he ask his daughter for her opinion when this is something that he's been wanting to make for 20 years or 30 years or whatever it is? I'm not saying that he shouldn't have. I'm saying maybe that's the mentality of this is what I want to make, so I'm just going to make it. And that's not the way who are we to say it?
Right.
To Francis Ford Coppola, but that's not the way you make a movie now. And I was thinking back to what you were saying earlier, which I totally agree with, his desire to make this feels like he was trying to make a movie from the 50s today. And the reason, or like one of the many reasons that is not working is because of the writing. If you look at like, what's the film? Somebody's Coming to Dinner.
Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? The writing in that movie, it doesn't matter what the camera does. The acting and the writing is so good that the camera could be on the wrong person that's not talking, and you still get it and you love it, and it's incredible. That's what makes those movies great. Lawrence of Arabia is great, not because of just, I mean, well, it's great for a lot of reasons. Okay, cinematography and you know, directing, all that. But a bad example. But I think Look Who's Coming to Dinner is a great example because of that. And the writing here is he's trying to say everything instead of saying one thing. And when you're trying to say everything, you almost say nothing. Because I can't grab on to that. Like there are a couple of moments that he would say these things and they were so poignant, and I cannot tell you what they are now. But I remember sitting in the theater thinking, wow, that was beautiful. Or wow, that was incredible. And the scene where she was talking to her father and she was quoting they were at dinner and she stood up and was standing next to him and she was quoting Marcus Aurelius. And she quoted what he said, what you know, for his father, she quoted it. And then she made a couple other quotes from Marcus Aurelius that are basically debunk that or like on her side.
Yeah, chastising him.
Right. I thought that could have been beautiful, but it was awkward and weird. Yeah. Who does that? Who stands up next to their dad and holds their hand and like quotes Marcus Aurelius? I'm sorry. No. So my point is, and then they move on, they go to somewhere else and they do something else. And so I can't latch on to that. Like if that is what you're saying with this film, say that for a long period of time before you say something else or make the whole film that thing, right? So that I can be a part of that thing. You're not inviting me to be a part of that thing because you're saying too many things and I can't stay with you. You know, maybe that's one of the reasons why some plays are hard for kids nowadays to latch onto as well, because they say a lot of stuff instead of saying one thing, you know, for the entirety of the play, or at least making it on its surface, you know, pretty obvious. So yeah, anyway.
So
it's a shame.
The other interesting aspect is apparently, I was reading this on Reddit, at some theaters had a 4-dimensional aspect to it.
I heard about that, yeah.
Where he hired actors to go in and shout a line at the screen, a question at the screen that Cesar Catilina answers in the film. And that to me speaks once again to, I guess, 2 things. One, that he's trying to do something new and fresh and reinvigorate, you know, film. But it also speaks to him not appreciating the experience itself. Like, what a wildly confusing moment as an audience member to have someone suddenly, you know, shouting at the screen. Like, if that happens in my theater, I'm probably being like, what do you, shut up. Like, I'm putting up a ticket. Like,
was it the scene where the frame goes small at the bottom? You remember that? Where
that's
Caesar's,
right. Huh.
Because it didn't happen in my theater, so
Neither, yeah.
I'm assuming that's why the frame. There's no other reason. I was always expecting something else to pop up in the black space, but the frame just shrinks down, like not to the center of the screen, but to the bottom of the screen.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe that's when.
Yeah, maybe so. But that was a really jarring experience. If you're in the theater for that, the rest of the, you know, for the next 5-10 minutes at least, you're probably like, is something else going to happen? Is someone else walking into the room? You're getting pulled out of the story. That's counter of what you actually want to happen for a viewer. You're trying to pull them into the story, not confuse them and shake them up. Now, if you want to confuse and shake them up, do that at the end. Leave them walking out that way.
Oh, great idea. Yes.
Like, you don't do that at any point before then, because you have more story that you want them to hear and engage with. And so that's just not the time to try to execute, you know, the annexation of Puerto Rico. Like, we got something else we're doing here. Little Giants reference for those who don't know. And so, yeah, I don't know. This was a big mess. I'm glad, he got to make this, and I completely agree with everything you were saying, man. Like you do have to kind of appreciate that someone put their art out into the world. He really, gave it his all. I don't doubt that for a second. I just do doubt the creative process that it took to get here should have been done differently, because ultimately the message that whatever that is, I'm not entirely sure, it's going to be lost because you didn't make the film engaging enough for people to want to continue talking about it. Instead, all I assume people are going to be talking about is how much they didn't like the movie. And that's the shame. Like your message got lost through your filmmaking itself. And that's tragic.
And it's, you're right. It's such a shame because it's Francis Ford Coppola. It's not like it's, us making a movie where,
yes,
it's everybody's going in there expecting to like it. You have a candid audience who, it's like if somebody goes to watch a comedy show, they go in there wanting to laugh, expecting to laugh. You have them, like ready to laugh. So all you got to do is stand up there and fart or say something remotely funny and they will laugh, right? They're expecting it. I go into a Francis Ford Coppola film, I expect to like it. That's why when, a few things happen, I'm like, okay, I'm going to shift in real time, shift how I'm watching this because he's got something to say. I want to be on the same page as him. I am going with you. I'm going to drag myself. I'm holding on to this film and I'm going to drag myself with me with this film. And I did the entire time. And then I walked out exhausted, right? That's not, it's just, yeah.
And so
such a shame.
Yeah, it really is. I think I'm okay to leave it there for the moment. Any other final thoughts? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have any. We talked about the stopping time and how that would have been cool to use instead of like more of a metaphor. I really would have liked to have seen a version of this without all the CGI or without 90% of it. That would have been only because when I did see shots without CGI in them, with zero CGI outside. So they had a lot of shots without CGI inside, in
sets.
Like in Crassus's place and stuff like that. But I mean, outside during the day where you see nature, I just always had this feeling of like I can take a breath. There's this weight off of me. I felt like a blanket was lifted off of me and now I can breathe. And I remember literally physically feeling that way in a couple of shots. And I just thought, man, if this whole movie was like that, it would be so much easier to digest. But it's like every building is CGI'd. Every building is fake. So I don't know what's real and what's not. And so I don't know what he's trying, because what he's building is also fake. It's CGI. So if we're starting from fake and going to fake, what is real? And that is not a message that I want to sit 2.5 hours through. It's just not, So
touche.
Anyway,
nice. So first, do you have your top 5? So we had a listener request, Jeremy, who wrote in a really lovely email, relatively new listener. He said he's gone back through all 290 episodes and listened to everyone that he's watched the film for, which is probably a lot based on his own top 15, which I don't have sitting in front of me. And so he gave us his top 15 and asked if we would give our whatever top 5, 10, whatever you got. Yeah. So with that in mind, what do you got, man? What did you hone your top 5 down to, which is impossible?
Well, this is a cool request. So thank you so much for this request.
We're breaking new ground almost 300 episodes in.
I know. I mean, I have a, it's kind of, it's like saying, what are your top 5 albums of all time? Like I can tell you my top 2, but then it gets harder
Yeah.
to narrow down the last 3. And I think it's that way for me here as well. So, and if you ask me tomorrow, it'll be different.
Yep.
So it really depends on how I feel right now. So I made this list, and then I made it again. And then a couple days later, I made it again. But I got to tell you, there are 2 on here that 3. There are 3 on here that were from my original when I first made the list.
Back.
And the last one is one of those 3. So, which is I'm just prefacing. So, whatever. I'll stop being long-winded. Number 1 is Interstellar.
Nice.
Which I think anybody, I'm sure, man, you everybody who's listened to this podcast knows and should not, should expect that. Number 2 is Back to the Future.
Ooh.
Which I still to this day think is like one of the greatest, best made films of all time.
Yeah.
So number 2 is Back to the Future. Number 3 is Warrior. If you remember our episode on Warrior,
Which was episode 3.
What?
It was episode 3.
It was episode 3. Well, there you go. Okay. So number 3 is Warrior, and mostly because of how it makes me feel.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a perfectly made movie in my mind, but I gotta chase the feeling. I always chase the feeling. If I'm just making something and I don't feel what I wanted to feel, then I failed. Like, always do that. And that movie, every time I watch it, makes me actually want to watch it now, gives me the feels. So number 3 is Warrior. Number 4 is Shawshank Redemption.
Nice.
Which is so funny because I did some research, and like it was kind of a failure in the box office, and just became a cult classic because it just was played so much on TV. So fine, whatever. Perfect movie.
Yeah.
In every shape and form. They almost didn't shoot that last shot, by the way. Anyway.
Say what's a nail?
And then, yeah, exactly. And then the last one, which made my list the first time, is a Francis Ford Coppola film.
Ooh.
Before I saw this movie, Godfather 2.
Wow.
Yes, which to this day is still, I remember seeing that, walking away thinking like, that is a masterpiece in every way. The cinematography, the story, the acting, the writing, it was just, I almost don't want anything to compete with it because it's that good for me. So yeah, there you go. Interstellar, Back to the Future, Warrior, Shawshank Redemption, Godfather 2.
Dude, nicely done. That's so, because, at the start of this conversation, I was like, some people think it's bad, and you were literally like, yeah, I did.
I rose my finger.
Yeah.
Me. Yeah.
Called the shot. Well done.
I want to hear yours, though.
This was hard. I have a bunch of honorable mentions because, like you, depending on the day. And so my top 10, Interstellar, easy, like as you said, should shock nobody. And then Good Will Hunting, like for me, I think that is the perfect movie for everything I want. And it's just, incredible. Lord of the Rings, like I have seen that so many times. It's one movie. Like it was all supposed to be one book, so I consider that one movie. And it just doesn't get old. Sunshine still makes my top 10. It's just a beautiful, wonderful genre blending thing that I can't get enough of. Before Sunrise at number 5. The vibes, it sends me on a journey. It captures my love of film and what film can be, to break all the molds and expectations of what you're going to get out of a story. Like and
it's got Ethan Hawke.
Like, what more do you need? Number 6, Call Me by Your Name. Like, I probably go back to that 2, 3, 4 times a year. I love it so much. And it sends me on just a great, anytime I want to feel deeply, like I'm going to put on Call Me by Your Name, just to get back in touch with those deep feelings. Which, speaking of, number 7, Warrior, for the exact same reason. I think it's a perfectly executed film, but I like it for the same reason. Every time I tried to pull it off my top 10 and sub in something else, I was like, man, but those last 2 minutes just send me. They just, wonderful. You have the national booming. Oh, you got to watch it. If you haven't seen Warrior, you got to watch it. And how many films do you really get about brotherhood? There's not that many, really. And most of them are about war itself. And so having something that is kind of about war, but it's not, like, it's just a wonderful film. Number 8 might surprise you, but Spotlight. I love a good shoe leather journalism story. And I've watched that so many times. It inspires me because of how unassuming the whole thing is. Like, there's no big moment when they slap cuffs on somebody, you know, but it's still got this great undertone of drama. And it's an ensemble piece, which are incredibly hard to do. At every phase, the writing, the performances, the editing, how do you structure this thing in a way that brings everyone in without leaving anyone out? I'm just in awe of that movie. McCarthy, just incredible filmmaking. And then at number 9, Never Let Me Go. Yes, I
nice.
love it. I love it. Deep emotional, film. Number 10, Garden State.
I've been wanting to go back and watch that recently.
I think if I hadn't gone back like 3 or 4 weeks ago and rewatched it, it may not have made my top 10. But being so recent, I was like, you know what? I still love it.
I saw an interview. I'm sorry, but you're calling it up. I saw an interview with Zach Braff, actually, and he was talking about the film, and he said that there was a scene that they cut where I guess it's the dad explains the mother dying.
Oh, wow.
Because in the movie, she's just not alive.
That's how we start.
And and it's been years since I've seen the movie, but he said that they shot it and he let somebody see it, maybe his manager or whatever, or somebody, and they said, this is the best scene in the movie and it is not going to make the movie.
Wow.
And Zach was like, what are you talking about? And then he rewatched it and he was like, it's better to not, because he explained what the scene was. And if you saw it, if you heard him describe it, you'd be like, I'm not going to describe it to you because maybe it's better that you don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah. That was so interesting. That made me want to go watch it. And that was this last week. So it's interesting. It made your top 10.
Because that great filmmaking for someone who just steps up to the bat, and it's also speaks to the collaborative nature of it. His editor, I think, really shaped that into the movie it is.
Maybe it was his editor who made this comment. Okay,
that would make sense. But it's so cool to kill your darlings. Like, this is an incredible scene, but it's not serving the bigger story. And you have to do that. You have to be willing to sacrifice for the greater good of getting your story across to the viewer. But there were so many like honorable mentions. I just was like, oh, what if like Braveheart and Man on Fire and Pan's Labyrinth and The Fall. We haven't even covered The Fall. And that's just I think the most beautiful movie ever made. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was on my short list. Gladiator, Notting Hill. Like, those are all that I was just like, oh, can I squeeze it? Not today. So that's my top 10. We'll link it into the show notes so that I don't have to repeat it again.
Love it.
So with all that in mind, what are you recommending this week?
Oh man, I was doing my whole list and I didn't even get a recommendation because I doing this. Just you give me yours and then I'll give you mine.
So I'm going to recommend the best screenwriting resource I've ever used. Whenever I first started screenwriting, was really like when I was 20. And the first thing I read was, it may have been Sid Field. It may have been something else. It was something along those lines. And I think I got halfway through it and I was like, this is bumming me out. And I didn't read anything for several more years. But when I was like 23, I ran into this website called wordplayer.com. I've referenced it 2 or 3 times on, over the course of 292 episodes. And wordplayer.com is run by 2 incredible screenwriters, Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who wrote like the Aladdin cartoon. They wrote Shrek. They wrote the first Pirates of the Caribbean. And so they have, really good track record. And it's just full of articles. And I think that's one thing that really helped me is these are very short, punchy articles that are also something that you can execute and understand, like the practical side of. And I love it. It's still like I've gone back over the past couple weeks and started perusing their articles again, and they've written so much stuff since 2004, or 2005, whenever I was diving into it. And so it's really nice to go back and be like, oh, there's new information, and I still love it. It's still all really good, even if I don't necessarily agree with all of it. It's good perspective, because sometimes you're telling a story that isn't really going to fall in line with some of their advice. And that's okay. Like, they're very plot-driven writers. Very plot-driven. Stuff that I'm like, you wouldn't use this on Good Will Hunting or Garden State or Before Sunrise. You're not going to use a lot of this. But it's still good stuff to know, because if you are writing whatever, an Interstellar or a Sunshine, these are all things you do want to be thinking about. And most films are those kinds of films. And so if you're a screenwriter or just interested in the art of screenwriting, go check out wordplayer.com. It's still an absolute diamond in the rough of writing resources.
Wow, that's awesome. I've heard you talk about it before.
Yeah.
On the podcast. That's cool.
Stunning.
Okay, I'm going to recommend an older film from an older filmmaker, just because and I'm surprised we haven't maybe done this, but I'm going to recommend Heat, Michael Mann's Heat, which anytime you bring Pacino and De Niro onto the screen, right, you're going to win something. But also Val Kilmer, and I think it's just a great example of a great way to make a fun movie, right? That's stressful and poignant at the same time. So, and it's from, I felt the need to kind of like go to like an older director too here, because I feel like this episode has been a kind of like, I don't want this episode to feel like a shit on Coppola, that he's out of touch and anything. I think he just had something to say, and he wanted to say it, and he did. I hope that he's happy.
Yeah, same.
I'm not, but that's who gives a shit if I'm happy. He's the one making the movie. It's his dollars he's spending. He's the one losing the money. If he is, I don't know what the box office is yet, because the first opening weekend is still going on right now. But good on him for doing it. So yeah, I felt like I wanted to go to like an older director who still got it too. I think Michael Mann is a great director, and Heat is a good example of that.
Great call. Yeah, Tokyo Vice is one of his recent projects on HBO, and excellent. Yeah, he's still got it. Nice. Well, stay tuned for next week. We are going to take a look at another new film coming out, Joker 2. So speaking of dicey propositions, we'll see if Todd Phillips can bring it home. I have my concerns, but you know what? I love taking a risk. So keep taking a risk. Francis Ford Coppola, Todd Phillips, everyone, like, take a risk. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to talk about, the kind of things you find interesting, we're happy to consider any and all recommendations, which we have one in the pipeline coming a couple weeks from now. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to leave a comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Megalopolis, spelled like it sounds.
Sounds like it's spelled. Whatever that means. I don't know how to say any of this stuff. So Ozymandias?
Yeah.
Ozymandias. Okay, cool. So should I read this?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. Is the middle name Bysshe?
Yeah, Bysshe.
Bysshe?
Sure.
Okay. So our quote of the day is from Percy Bysshe Shelley. It's a poem called Ozymandias. Okay. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip, a sneer of cold command, tell that its sculptor, well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of the colossal wreck, boundless and bare, The lone and level sands stretch far away.
So obviously, like, this is a pretty well-known phrase, right? Look on my works, ye mighty in despair, is fairly well-known. And the whole description here is a traveler who comes upon in the middle of the desert these huge 2 stone legs, and then a placard that says, look on my works, ye mighty in despair, but nothing remains. And so it's speaking to the nature of humanity and time, and how you can't conquer time. Time is undefeated. And no matter what you build, eventually it will weather away into nothing. And so it kind of speaks to the pride, and this king thinking that he could ever outlive time and build anything that could stand the test of time. It's hubris. And I don't know, I like this poem here for this movie for, a couple of reasons. One, just to remind us that that's the nature of the game. Like, none of us are going to outlive everything, right? Our legacy dies eventually. And to that end, I love that he took a shot, man. At the end of the day, this is all, shadows and dust, and for him to say, you know what, I'm going to spend $120 million making my passion project, and here we go. And he did it. And it's awesome that he believed in himself and that he put his money where his mouth is, because at the end of the day, what does it really matter? The universe is going to implode, in the big crunch or whatever's, heat death. Like, so why not take your risk? Why not take a swing? And I love Francis Ford Coppola for doing it, even though, like, for me, it was just sand and rubble. For him, it was, an incredible work, worth pursuing.
Great point. Beautiful. Well, this was fun. Yeah. No, it's always great conversation, man.
Yeah.
It really is. I love talking about this stuff. And thank you for the request of our. It was fun to, like, kind of look at films and say, okay, what are my top 5? All right, well, today they're these. So yeah, thank you for that. Please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts. If there's a film that you'd like to see us pick apart, let us know. Maybe we'll do it one day. Looks like in a couple of weeks we've got one coming up. So that could be you next time. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.